Hi! Today I'm starting a new series of videos on King Henry VIII, the second Tudor monarch and a man who ruled from 1509 until his death in 1547. He's a fascinating historical character and one who divides opinion, with some seeing him as nothing more than a tyrant or monster, and others seeing him as more complex and having achieved much during his reign. By the way, if you'd like to spend an hour with me talking about Henry VIII, I'm doing a members-only live stream here on YouTube this Sunday, the 28th of July at 10 p.m. UK time, 5 p.m. New York time. It'll be great to talk Tudor and to share our views on this iconic king. So I'll put details of that in the description, but you can join. You can become a channel member by pressing join on the homepage, but I'll give you a link for it. I'm kicking off my series on Henry VIII by looking at people who are believed by some to be Henry VIII's illegitimate children. Henry VIII had 3 legitimate children, Mary I, Elizabeth I, and Edward VI, and 1 acknowledged illegitimate child, a son, Henry Fitzroy, Duke of Richmond and Somerset, but others were rumoured to be the king's offspring. One of these was Ethelreda or Etheldreda Malte, whose life is a fascinating blend of fact, conjecture and Tudor intrigue. Ethelreda, also referred to as Audrey or Esther, is believed to have been born in the late 1520s or early 1530s, possibly on June the 23rd, which is the feast day of Saint Ethelreda or Etheldreda, an Anglo-Saxon saint and daughter of King Anna or Honor of East Anglia. This timeline aligns with her marriage to John Harrington of Stepney between September 1546 and November 1547. Royal records describe her as the bastard daughter of the said John Malte by Joan Dyngley, alias Dobson. Despite being referred to as the illegitimate daughter of John Malte, a tailor of Henry VIII's great wardrobe, there are significant suggestions that she might have been Henry VIII's own child. According to Ethelreda's husband's son, Sir John Harrington, in his Nugæ Antiquae, in the 38th year of his reign, King Henry VIII granted significant estates to John Malte and Ethelreda, who Harrington describes as the king's natural daughter, by Joanna Dyngley, alias Dobson, put under Malte's care. Harrington writes that the king, having special love and regard for her, granted these estates for her use and benefit, but she always passed for Malte's natural daughter, and that shortly after being granted the estates, she married Harrington Sr., a confidential servant of the king. Alison Weir, in her biography of Mary Boleyn, the Great and Infamous Whore, cites a 1656 letter from Jonathan Leslie, deputy clerk, who wrote, "The great King Henry VIII matched his darling daughter to John Harrington, and though a bastard, dowered her with the rich lands of Bath Priory." This information was, according to Leslie, sourced from Sir Andrew Markham, a descendant of Harrington's second wife. Although these rumours suggest Henry VIII's paternity, there is no conclusive evidence to prove that Ethelreda was his daughter. Henry VIII never formally acknowledged her, possibly because acknowledging an illegitimate daughter was less consequential in that era. But what were these grants? Well, the substantial grants made by Henry VIII to John Malte and Ethelreda included lands and manors worth thousands of pounds, a fortune by contemporary standards. For example, in May 1541, John Malte received a grant of lordships and manors in Berkshire, along with the tithes and advowsons of several vicarages and churches in Berkshire. In July 1544, Malte and Ethelreda were granted over £1,800 for manors and lands leased in Somerset, previously owned by Glastonbury Abbey. By September 1546, further grants included over £1,300 for the lordship and manor of Kevelston and other properties in Somerset for the benefit of John and Ethelreda. If we consider that £1,000 in the 1540s is equivalent to over £400,000 today, these lavish gifts raise questions about why a tailor and his illegitimate daughter would receive such generosity from the king. Was the king simply rewarding and helping a man who'd served him faithfully since 1527? Or does it hint at a deeper connection? Additional evidence supporting Ethelreda's royal paternity includes her alleged close relationship with Queen Elizabeth I. Both Ethelreda and her husband John Harrington attended Elizabeth during her imprisonment in the Tower of London in 1554. Harrington wrote of their emotional bond with Elizabeth, how they shed tears together, indicating a significant connection. However, while Alison Weir finds this evidence compelling, it doesn't definitely prove that Ethelreda was Henry VIII's daughter. Ethelreda's mother is identified in royal grants as Joan Dyngley, alias Dobson. Some speculate she might have been a royal laundress with potential access to the king's private quarters, making a romantic liaison plausible. However, historian Amy Licence, in her book The Six Wives and Many Mistresses of Henry VIII, notes that a woman named Anne Harris was the chief napery laundress listed in the 1526 Eltham Ordinances. Although she would have had assistants, Queen Catherine would have had a laundress too. But Licence writes that it is far more likely that any laundress the king would attempt to seduce would be the one washing his shirts and underclothing, who therefore had access to his privy chambers and knew the intimate secrets of his body. Ethelreda would have been conceived during the king's courtship of Anne Boleyn, when he'd stopped sleeping with Catherine of Aragon and before he'd consummated his relationship with Anne. Licence states, if we reject the premise that Henry was chaste for 7 years, then he had to be sleeping with someone. Given his romantic devotion to Anne and his intention to make her his wife, it's likely that he did exactly what many noblemen of his day did and sought physical relationships on a one-off basis with women of the lower classes. So, perhaps a laundress. Others, like Philippa Jones, author of The Other Tudors, Henry VIII's Mistresses and Bastards, suggest that Ethelreda's mother was more likely to have been a higher-born woman like Joan More, daughter of Sir John More of Dunkelin, Worcestershire, who married first Michael Ashfield, then James Dingley, and finally Thomas Parker of Notgrove in Gloucestershire. Jones believes that the name Dobson was an error in transcription for Dunkelin. However, as author Kate Emerson points out in the notes of her novel Royal Inheritance, John Malte's will left a bequest to Audrey Malte, my bastard daughter, begotten on the body of Joan Dyngley, now wife of one Dobson. So Jones's theory doesn't really make sense. Ethelreda's advantageous marriage to John Harrington, a man with fluctuating fortunes, suggests her well-provided dowry played a crucial role. Harrington, who served Henry VIII and later Thomas Seymour, faced imprisonment twice, first following Seymour's fall and then again in 1554 after Wyatt's rebellion, which is when he and Ethelreda served Elizabeth in the Tower, but he remained a significant figure after that. Ethelreda bore him a daughter, Esther or Hester, before her death in 1559. Their daughter is last mentioned in the records in 1568. Harrington went on to marry Isabel Markham, another of Elizabeth I's ladies. Whether Ethelreda was truly the illegitimate daughter of Henry VIII remains unanswered. While the king's financial generosity and Ethelreda's privileged status suggest a possible paternal link, concrete evidence is lacking. Was she Henry VIII's daughter, or simply the beneficiary of royal favour towards a loyal servant and his family? We know that King Henry VIII was very, very generous towards people who served him faithfully, and perhaps he felt sorry for a man who had an illegitimate daughter in his care. The enigma of Ethelreda Malte continues to intrigue historians and enthusiasts alike. She's a mystery. Thank you for joining me, and I do hope that you can join me in my live stream on Henry VIII on the 28th of July. But I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye bye.